Still picking up some from what I was mentioning about the intellect being defended, in a sense, by having an axe, by having an instrument, by having something standing between it and what seems to be its own operations. And once you get past the point, if you do, of seeing that people use in a very crude manner, at a very simple level, that somebody will use an instrument, or if you'd like a little extended, an instrumentality, but like really an instrument of somebody fooling around with their trumpet or their guitar, their tennis racket, to keep them from having to do something. Or at least it offers a kind of defense to fool around, to look at it, and shake it, to blow the spit out, to retune it. But if you can get past that point, which shouldn't be very hard, you begin to see in a less specific or a less material manner that people do it intellectually. That is part of the purpose I was suggesting to you of the intellect itself, and specifically part of the purpose of people seeking to become educated, becoming expert, because it acts as a kind of defense to the intellect, if you can begin to see it, wherein the more expert you are, the less you actually have to think. Not only can you see, if you can, I'm about to push it, but picking back up a little that we were hitting last time we were taping, if you can begin to see that the area of someone being an expert, the more it is narrowly defined. But in the case if we have someone who is not simply a renowned or recognized figure in English lit, but is now down to the point not only of specializing in the romantic poets, but is now down to the point that his field, and in this case I would certainly hope it would be a singular endeavor, but his field is the British romantic poets who wrote between 1890 and 1891 after 4 p.m. The closer it gets to that, although the ordinary intellect, if it was following this for any reason, might think, well, if you're going to do that, you're asking for it, because it's going to be easy to find the mistakes and the flaws in this person's so-called area of expertise, because he's got it so narrowly defined, when the point is, if it gets so narrowly defined, they will be what amounts to singularly wired and primed to do such, and they are less likely to be in a position of having to defend what they say. Beyond that, beyond all of that, if you can follow any of that, there is even a wider area, which is, of course, a more narrow area according to which eye you're using here in the 3D world. It's up to you. Some of you I know can wear a hat and some can't, and you have to look at it this eye. At least for the sake of dramatics, I'll say, all right, the ultimate area is not simply an area of learned expertise, of education. That is, I am now an expert, a renowned authority in British lit. If you can follow this, consider what would be the ultimate defensive area intellectually, the instrument, the instrumentality to protect oneself. It's an area of expertise, but it's a very specific one. And what is it? Being an expert on myself. That as long as a guy is concerned about, I tell you what kind of guy I am, which does not exclude somebody who says, well, you know, I can't tell you what kind of guy I am. Which he's telling you the kind of guy he is. I haven't had time to do it, or I've just been too busy. I'm not. Well, in fact, I'm not the kind of guy, I do not think naturally, who is inclined to introspection. That's the kind of guy I am. In other words, I don't know what kind of guy I am. As long as the guy is telling you what kind of guy he is, you got to understand that his ignorance is absolutely safe, assured, and sheltered. Now, who is immune at the ordinary level from this position? I'll give you a secret. The answer starts with Z, and it's not Zorro. The answer, of course, is nobody. Z-O-B-O-D-Y. Everyone, whether they would say the words or not, everyone is saying, by being alive, by breathing, and by having their blood circulate, whether they want to or inclined to say it verbally or not, they are saying, I am at least an expert on moi. Now, as long as you believe you are an expert on you, a whole wide range of ignorance, getting very close to all-inclusive, that kind of ignorance is safe. You are protected. You are not going to be unduly humiliated. You're not going to be attacked, which is not really the point. That's kind of psychological descriptions that may strike some people as being pertinent to start with. But what it is doing is protecting that young, budding intellect in man. It is a defense mechanism, as I tried to get some of you to see, in a way the operations of the brain itself, its functions known as the intellect, as mentality and etc., thinking, which its manifestation is, its garb, its form is talk, that talk is the kind of, allegorically speaking, I guess, sympathetic and parasympathetic areas of the human nervous system. It is the brain's fist and feet to take care of itself, to either run away so it can come back and play another day, or to stand and fight. That verbally you can say, who do you think you are? I've written 3 books. What have you written? And if the other guy says, well, I've written 8 books, then you can say, well, I bet I know more about myself and what I think about my area than you do. Even if you are illiterate, you are still an expert. You can still shake your fist at somebody because you don't know who I am. You don't know my problems. You don't know my life experiences. You do not know the sorts of things that work on me. Because the best one is just, you don't know my problems. That if you made some comment, if you were making some comment, and you say, well, as a matter of fact, you probably wouldn't think it from looking at me. Me being a electric toaster repairman, that I am interested in the British Romantic poets. But as a matter of fact, Milton is one of my favorites. And someone says, Milton was not one of the Romantic poets, at best a neoclassicist. Then, a defense open to everyone is, I knew that, but God, I have been feeling so bad. You know, when you start to get a cold and a flu, you know how it just kind of drains your brain. I mean, I knew that as well as my own name. I knew that. I meant Blake is who I meant, or all of that. Forget the specific examples, or get past them. All of that is still the basis, or still a reflection of the basis I was saying, that the ultimate instrument, not a saxophone, not a PhD, not a list of publishing credits, not even renown, not even fame as being an expert in something. All that's good, and there are relative scales within the areas I just mentioned. But at a very personal, always with you, can't be taken away level, is all of that pales next to just the common everyday expertise that everyone is wired up to believe they have, that at least I'm an expert on me. I'll tell you what kind of guy I am. Which is another way of saying, I'll tell you that my brain is operating. It will tell you for life that at some level, life is still allowing me to protect my little brain, mine and everyone else's, but it's also telling you that insofar as knowing what in the hell might be going on in life, my brain knows as much as my kneecaps, just like you, sir. Just like you with them. You know, all your list of credits. As long as you will continue, verbally or otherwise, to say what kind of guy I am, that you believe that you have some knowledge of it, you believe that there is some importance, you believe that the study of man, the individual, has some potential profit, and that you will expend your energies and be driven along such paths. As long as you'll do that, the truth is you'll never know what kind of guy you are. Now, you may know enough to say, well, I know what kind of guy I am, and you may give a description. Your wife or girlfriend might be standing next to you and go, no, I can validate that. Or you might say, all right, all this talk about knowing what kind of guy you are, I'm going to tell you the truth. I have lived such a life. I've had to take care of my family. My father died, and I've had my brothers and sisters. I'm going to tell you what. I just barely got through. You know, I had a decent upbringing and a 5th grade education. But I'm going to tell you the truth. I haven't had time to actually worry about what kind of guy I am. I was too busy out there having to work. All right, that's what kind of guy he is. And as long as you believe that, as long as you can act humble, you can act arrogant, you can say, well, I know more about me to anybody in the world, or you could say, it just so happens that what kind of life I've had to lead thus far, I know very little about me. All of that, you're still claiming expertise in you. You're claiming expertise in the field of study of man the individual. There is no such study profitable. There is no study of man the individual. At the very best, and I'm just playing with numbers enough to let your mind operate in symbols, at the very best, you're trying to study the rackets. And the rackets are run by three families. You know, everybody, you know that by now. By the Heights family, by the C family, and by the Gambuzo family. And at the very best, if you spent your whole life studying, you might become an expert on how the C family runs the rackets, or how the Heights family runs prostitution. All of this, of course, allegorical. At the very best, you would know nothing. You would have no idea about the general running of the rackets. All right, if you went through life on this planet and you applied yourself to studying the width of everything, begin to sound like some kind of deranged Sesame Street character. But you being an expert in any area of man the individual, that you applied yourself to studying the width of everything, from the width of cars, people, opinions, beliefs, economic theories, possibilities, but only the width. What would you know? Now you can say at the end of your life, as we're all staying around the bed laughing at you and having sport at your wasted life, you could say, no, no, no. At least by God, I know everything there is to know, or more than anybody on this planet, about the width of everything from political beliefs to theories about life after death to double-wide homes. And we could all kind of go, we believe you, we believe you. But you understand, by narrowing it down that, my little joke, part of the cynicism would be, from another view would be, all right, we'll agree. We'll all agree that you know more about the width of everything than anybody. So what? Because in one sense, you know even less. What does that tell you about anything, the width? Dramatics are tiring, aren't they? Well, ponder, if you'd like to. Who but a real revolutionist, a real neural subversive, would somehow enjoy realizing themselves as being an integral part of the ultimate dumbness? Nobody. That is completely different than a guy saying, well, I'll tell you what kind of guy I am. I don't know what kind of guy I am. Now, this is something else. See, everybody else is an expert on themselves, at the very least. But who else but somebody into a fifth dimension, at least, deranged? Nah, shouldn't frighten you. Intellectually revolutionary. Would derive any profit, pleasure, from simply realizing, I don't mean that's the end of it, but from simply realizing in the beginning that I am an irreplaceable, inescapable, intricate part of the great supreme dumbness. Not like my old intelligence believes that I am a part and maybe having fuel my own growing awareness of my own intelligence. I may be surrounded by cerebral Philistines and dwarfs, but I'm getting somewhere. I know more and more about this and this. Did you say this and that? Well, no, this and this. Just checking. Yes, but I'm an expert on this and this. A quote was from a reporter. I don't think it was copyrighted, and plus I'm giving you just a rough version in case any of you are related to this person and if they're looking for their royalties. The quote was, along these lines. The reporter said, "It is not about myself that I'm concerned." This had to do with a kind of implied, threatened censorship, untoward editing of a story. And the reporter, after it came out, said, "It is not about me personally that I'm concerned. It's freedom of the press." The quote made the news. Well, of course, the press is the one that runs the news, but freedom of the press. The person said, the individual, this collection of molecular activities passing off as a person, like all of us. And this particular person was drafted into the job description of being a reporter. It is not about myself individually that I'm concerned. It is the matter of freedom of the press. Now herein you have got men wrapping themselves this time in a kind of, at least their intellectual existence. They are now, in these kind of instances, cloaking themselves in institutionalized instrumentalities, which is a variation, but one that is not normally seen and one that affects everyone's nervous system, that is no longer the individual level. And don't stop at some cheap, ordinary shot at my quote in the story, because we could say, well, everybody is grinding their own little axe, and the person saying, well, it's not me, the censorship, it's not the establishment's throat, foot on my throat that concerns me. No, I'm too sophisticated, blah, blah, blah. It is about the general freedom of the press. And if you were an ordinary cynical person, you could go, right, sure, everybody's real concerned about some kind of vague theoretical or political theory, but they're only concerned when it just so happens, just coincidentally, happens to affect them. Boy, what a coincidence. You know, I've been following this reporter. I've seen him or her on the news every night for years, and not one time, not once have they ever mentioned anything about freedom of the press. And then something happens to them, and suddenly, you know, they're waving the banners for constitutional rights and etc. Now, don't stop there. It is a variation of being an expert on oneself. It is a variation of protecting oneself by having your own guitar, having your own trumpet, having your own tennis racket. But there is a wider form of a kind of institutionalized, a commonly held, a culturally held, would be if you need a simple, blur way of trying to get to it, like a commonly held instrument. That's what I was meaning by a kind of cloak of institutionalized instrumentalities. It is not limited, of course, to the Fourth Estate by any means, because you can see these kind of intellectual moves in the world of academia, religion, politica. Great good old examples that you people always get a chuckle out of, being the intellectually shark-infested people you are. Economists, meteorologists, priests and rabbis of all descriptions. That is, anybody who just patently doesn't know what they're talking about, is you not only wrap yourself or hold up an instrument of individuality, expertise, so wait a minute, economics may not yet be an exact science, but don't laugh at me. I have a PhD from Harvard. I have done work beyond that at such and such think tank. I've been here and there. If it is moving into an area wherein it may lend itself to be called an exact science, I must humbly submit to you that I will be in the avant-garde of it. And I am recognized by my peers, am I not? And the paid peers go, right, Chief. That's one thing. But it is at another scale that the economist simply does not protect himself by waving his own PhD or his own publishing credits. He wraps himself in a kind of institutional vexillium of, it could be Harvard itself, or it could be the whole field of academia. Because he could say, if he was in that kind of defensive mode, that I know all the smart comments that people oftentimes make about economic forecasting. And I'll admit to you, it is not the same kind of exact science that perhaps geometry is. But my friends, you intellectual people, you've got to understand that economics is a part of the academic scientific community. Physics did not start out knowing specifically and precisely what was happening. It was a stop-and-go process, one step at a time. Economics, going on the same path. You are cloaking yourself with a wider defense mechanism. The guitar is getting larger. The trumpet's getting real big, and there's whole lots of people now helping you hold up the trumpet. I'm not concerned about my individual story. I'm not concerned just about me as a reporter. You know, who am I? My concern is over the health and well-being of freedom of the press. Now, all of this has, would you like me to say, very little to do for you people out there on tape? Or would you take a deep breath and me tell you it's got nothing to do, other than wordily, with matters of the press and reporting? Because all that is simply a reflection of what is already going on in the individual nervous system, and that the little young functioning intellect is already not only wired and primed up to talk about what kind of guy I am, even when you're just a little bitty nipper and you just begin to talk, one of the first things you start saying is, Mama? Daddy? And I'll go, yes. Let me tell you what kind of guy I am. You might say Mama and Daddy first, but the third thing you're going to say is what kind of guy you are. Now, I know you may not have used those words, but you say, Mama, Daddy, and they go, he can talk, he can talk. What do you got to say? The third thing you say, well, I don't like spinach. I don't like going to bed so early. Whatever it is, the third thing you say is some variation of what kind of guy I am. But it operates like a larger pattern in the operations of the brain, that as soon as you begin to feel some kind of connection to the out there, you begin to try and wrap yourself up. You don't do it, of course, willfully, but the brain itself begins to use all of the available possible connections, and it begins to wrap itself institutionally. In the family, to begin with, you might say. Then in your school, in your neighborhood, then perhaps in your religion, or your race, your nationality. It's all of no importance whatsoever. None, none, none. That is specifically. It is just still, you might as well be saying, I identify myself mostly with my job of repairing tubers. Or I identify myself most with being a member of the Sky High Club, inasmuch as I'm 7 feet 9 inches tall. It's of no importance what it is, as long as you will wrap yourself in that kind of cloak. You're not prepared to go into solo practice. You're not prepared to sing in the nude. You're not prepared, of course, to sing in the nude on a trapeze without a safety net and with no score, which is my other way. Those of you that missed the last taping, was another way of talking about being able to think in a new building site. Being able to have the brain operate in a way that would really qualify as being called, if anybody could call it that, if they were qualified to call what would be qualified to be called that, comma, new intelligence. But as long as you're going to protect yourself to you, this has nothing to do with you being outside, of course, showing off or trying to make other people think that you're nuts. I don't think most people have any call trying to make other people think they're nuts. That's got very little to do with what I'm talking about, but I thought since advice is free, there it is. Of course, some of you I know personally, and I really offer that advice personally. But to yourself, if you're going to be defensive, if you have got to protect yourself, if you will entertain the kinds of information, the kind of noise that life is already driving through your nervous system, through your brain, that would make you say your own variations constantly of, my opening quote to this paragraph, well, I'm not so concerned actually about me being insulted, but it's these people making those kind of remarks against my blank, my tribe, my profession, my sex, my family. It's not me I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the decency of life. Now, if we're going to have people making those kind of prejudicial statements, making those kind of attacks on me, they could do it to anybody. Again, if you want to be cynical right quick, you could say, well, when did we ever hear this person speak up before? That they were so concerned about the slings and arrows of outrageous verbal fortune and prejudice, verbal hostility being passed about in life. It's been going on all their life, and we never heard a word about this, have we? Until somebody said something to them, right? Ha, ha, ha. It is life back in operation of making the proper energy exchanges. It is not a form of irony. It is no place for sarcasm, although that would appear to be the case, that people do not take things personally until what? Until they take things personally. Good, good. At least we cleared up one thing that obviously needed no clearing up. Life only uses the individual to take things personally when there is some need for a collection of molecules somewhere to go. And then you got the variation of the quote of, well, now I don't mean this personally, because I'm not just defending myself personally as one reporter, one little reporter. My concern is over the blah, 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 blah. Now, I would assume that none of you will get completely caught in the vicinity of my example. It could be religion. Somebody could say, well, now I feel no need to defend my religion after they've just been insulted in some way. And they say, it's not me personally I'm concerned about. It's not me and my religious beliefs, if I have any. It's not that. What I'm concerned about is the overall question of intolerance of the whole planet. Can any of you begin to hear past words that it's a form of energy, and it's running a certain way, and from this one person's local view, the person I'm using, the reporter, somebody speaking about religious intolerance, speaking about anything, if they're saying that I am not that concerned about me, and I'm not using me as being the primo example or the alpha and omega of the problem, it just so happens I'm here in this particular circumstance when it occurred, but my concern is over a wide range, over humanity, if you will, or over a whole profession, over a whole body politic, over a whole political theory. Now, what is taking place behind the words is, if you begin to see it, is what ordinary people think of as being some negative flow of energy. Of course, we're obviously back to using some of my terms, my temporary terms, but the person believes they've been insulted, the reporter, by attempted censorship, or a religious person believes that their beliefs have been insulted, their church. All right, so to them, there was a negative flow of energy, and it's got to be counteracted. And life does it, which is taking place here, but then it seems to be reflected out here in institutionalized, cultural, social milieus also, examples. But what's taking place in here is it responds not just on the basis that if we were going to measure it, and it came out as 1 millikirk of whatever that is, of negative energy coming into your brain, that is, your religion got, or your profession was insulted. Somebody made a nice, good, fat, juicy joke about attorneys, or priests, or bricklayers, whatever your case may be. And this one little piece comes in, and it's more than just you pushing back. It then begins as another form of the exchange of energy that life in your own brain has you not just to push back with 1 millikirk in return of energy to defend it. It's like, come here guys, come here. Your own brain cells, it's like you get some help to where you can send out, and it's not just, of course it is, but it appears to be not just quantity, but you can send back, let's say now, it's not just quantity. I'm not going to stop and go through this. But let's say that I'm going to have to make it up, that you send back 10 millikirks of energy in response to this one insult. But you do it on the basis of, where's my cloak? Wrapping yourself in the flag. That it's not just me as an individual reporter. It's not just me and my problems of which I'm concerned. It's not just some unthinking person insulting my religion, or my state, or my nation, or my sex. No, no, no. My concern is, you want to bring up all these other people, and the Greek chorus kind of steps up, and they all got little flags, and they wrap themselves. And you say, It's for a greater good that I speak. It's all quite necessary. Many of you following this, it is all quite, at the ordinary level, admirable, honorable. But if you stay immersed in such, and you don't have to be up to your nose, if you just stay like ankle deep, and you keep having to slosh around, you may not be drowning, but if you're going to live in a swamp, you got to admit this, you're not ever going to end up being much of a long-distance speed runner. You just keep sloshing about, and it may seem from one level up, you might be in a swamp with other people that say, this is all good, we should defend ourselves, we should try and uphold the values of freedom of religion, freedom of the press. We should do all these things that ordinary people do while they're waiting to be slaughtered. I mean, while they're living this life. And so perhaps from the knees up or the ankles up, you and a whole lot of people are engaged in this. And you comfort each other, and you swap flags, and you'll wrap yourself in your flag one time, and they'll wrap themselves in theirs. You'll live out quite an ordinary life. But insofar as becoming fleet of foot, you can stay right there having to slosh around, and it's always some kind of suction. You're stepping in the mud. And it may seem from up here that I'm pretty free, and I can make gestures, and I can speak, and I can look around, but it's always that something is holding me. That is the kind of institutionalized instrumentality of being caught up in the need, as it comes out in human ordinary thought, in the need to defend some larger something, some value system, some belief system, some systematized body of thought. Of course, if you get good, the need to defend anything. If the need to defend anything, we're speaking now at a verbal level. I'm not encouraging people to turn their other cheek when somebody's about to shoot you in the cheek with a .357. But to defend oneself at a non-physical level. To defend simply the operations of the intellect. That is honorable. It is admirable. I'm just using everyday words. You know I don't believe that. Yes, I do. I'm sorry. It is necessary that people do that. But it is not necessary that you do it. I'll admit I have a certain kind of entree to certain information periodically that goes on this planet. I'll admit that. And I'll tell you this. If any of you quit being concerned about ordinary affairs up here, I mean, religious intolerance, let's say, political intolerance, if any of you stop doing that, and I get the word, which eventually I would, that there's a shortage of people being concerned. I don't care on which side. You know, let's say that you took sides in the so-called Irish problem. Yeah. Maybe your side, you were wired up to still feel some kinship to the great Anglo-Saxon tradition, and maybe you feel like, well, the British had to do what they had to do, or maybe you came from potato land, and you think, well, the British should be whipped like dogs and go back where they came. Whatever it is, if you stop worrying about it, which it needs to be worried about, it's obvious. It needs to be worried about. If you stop worrying about it, whichever side you're on, and I hear, which I will, I assure you, and I'll hear that there's a shortage on your side, I'll tell you. So that you can go back to doing it. I'll tell you just as soon as I hear about it. What's better than a good old down-home example? Of course, there is something, but one other little way you might look at talk, ordinary information, areas of expertise, you being a student of yourself at the ordinary level. Another way that you could look at it as being a form of protection is it kind of keeps a cerebral spotlight off of you internally, the brain itself, and makes it want to shine, light up the good old feckless out there. Is let's look at them. Since they don't know what they're doing, why look at me? Nobody else can play tennis any better than I can, allegorically speaking. No, who plays trumpet better than me? Everybody's horn slips, gets too full of spit, Everybody's tennis racket will turn on them one time or another. But one thing about being an expert, one thing specifically about being able or going along with wrapping yourself in some kind of institutionalized flag or instrumentality is, in here, not just psychologically, but in here, it's as though it protects the brain from even the slight inclination for it to want to fool around and look at itself, which it's not normally anyway, but it's just like added protection. You should be thankful if you're ordinary that as long as you can stay concerned out here, like, well, I need to help some of the people out here. Now, by God, I may be in some areas less than brilliant, but Jesus Christ, I mean, we got people walking around here. I'm surrounded in life by living examples of El Stupido, dumbos. So at least I should try and help my neighborhood, help my country, help my institutions. As long as the brain can be even better protected from it potentially looking at itself and going, whoa, dude, what is this? Of course, even accidentally, I'm being funny, that doesn't actually happen, but why run the risk that you might be sitting around and your own brain decide, well, let's see, what'll I do? And it could do it at ordinary level and just suddenly kind of looked at itself and went, say what? Why run the risk? I'm speaking for life, just kind of figuratively. And as I mentioned, you could also look at this as being another example that we mentioned in some tapings a while back of how rare it is, increasingly so, for people to be in solo practice, whether they be doctors, accountants, automobile mechanics, or people. Well, all right, any major city, got the yellow pages, look under H and look under hermit and see how many you find. That, of course, is an extreme example, but people do not want to, increasingly so. I don't mean we're going downhill. Some of you should be able to understand now, here I go off on the side again, that things can apparently be going one way, and as, remember the example we talked about for a little bit once, that from very rational, three-dimensional views, they can say, wait a minute, we have good evidence that life is not progressing based upon the fact that we see that there is a decreasing number of life forms. And so to say that life is evolving is suspect. It does not mean, when I say that it is increasingly rare to find people working in solo practice, it does not mean that things are going downhill. It doesn't mean it's going uphill. But it means things are going. It means that things are alive. But it is a fact. It's just the way life is wired up through man now that there is less and less operations of people doing jobs of any kind solo. People working by themselves. This is not, if you lost your place, unconnected, suggest I, to the wrapping of oneself in institutionalized instrumentalities. Or singing solo with no known score, nude on a trapeze with no safety net. If for some reason, God would only know why, that I repeated that several more times and some ordinary person said, well, I believe I'll try that. And they were really going to give it a shot. What's the first thing they'd do? The very first thing. Who can I get to help me? They might even ask me, what's your idea? Could you help me with this? Solo means solo. I mean, I'm like you. I have no great love for the dictionary, but by God, sometimes it's right on it. Solo means by yourself. Well, yeah, if I need some help to get started. Sort of felt like Edgar Buchanan. Taking it a bit further, can you also see, I mentioned weather and economics and religion, that when it regards secondary affairs, those of you on tape, it's my arbitrary, useful, temporary mapping of primary affairs and secondary affairs in the life of man. Secondary affairs would be anything right now that absolutely, from an ordinary common view, would not be necessary to sustain life. All right. The singular human activities. In regard to the secondary affairs and what I'm talking about, can any of you see that the more you can talk about something, the less you actually have to do about it? For you people on tape, again, I point out, don't stop and chuckle and punch yourself in your sarcastic old ribs and go, ha ha, and think that I'm a bigger wise ass than you are. It is not a negative statement. It is certainly not a sarcastic statement. It is a matter of fact. It's the way it's supposed to be. That's part of the basis of secondary affairs. But if you can begin to see it very specifically, secondary affairs can be done by, obviously, can be done materialistically speaking. That is, physically speaking. It's not just talk. But in secondary affairs, the more you can talk about something, the less, at least the possibility is there, the less you actually have to do about them. What is being an expert? What is being a critic? Which is being an expert. It's just you're kind of an ipsy-dixy critic. And of course, if you're on a big paper or a big TV station, it doesn't matter whether you're Polish or not. Religion, economics, politics. All right, if you want something, how about real crude? The difference between the primary being eating and the secondary activity of eating, remember, my little example would be dining, which is nothing wrong with it. It's a hobby, but it's a secondary activity. But consider it in the full range of talk. That could be writing, it could be your own thinking about it. But in the full range of talk, the more you can talk, and when I say can talk, that is you can make your talk fly. That you're in the right place at the right time, you got the right kind of flag, the right kind of institutionalized milieu there. You are the right person at the right time, at the right place. The more you can talk about gourmet food preparation, the more you can talk about exotic dining, the less you actually have to do about it. Don't look too blank, it's just simple as a beaver's wardrobe. Let's say that there is a whole field of gourmeting. A real hobby, which there is. People make a living, but there is a whole field, books. They got clothes, TV shows, tapes are sold, all sorts of things. And so you'd think, all right, if I was going to take up that hobby, I do have an interest in food, and I would, it's just a hobby, but look at all the things you can do. Things you can buy for your home, your own equipment there in the kitchen. But do you also understand that a person could be well recognized nationally, internationally, well recognized as one of the experts, especially in a specific field, but one of the world's leading gourmets, food authorities? And it's not in question. But do you realize that if you actually ask down to the physical, the material level, the person may never cook, period, much less exotic cook. May not even have a kitchen. They may have turned their kitchen into a beaver farm. But the person can be an expert, a well-recognized expert in a field, and all they do with the field is talk. Think about it. Nobody ever does, because they're not supposed to. It doesn't help any ordinary person. It doesn't seem to be doing you people a hell of a lot of good. Snap out of it. Was that too simple? How about religion? How about something important? What could be more important, especially to your forefathers, and that is, and some of the forefathers still alive and your ancestral genes inside of your own nervous system now, than religion? And they're experts on religion. Do you ever see gravy on their pants? Do you ever see cheese under their fingernails? Do you ever get the whiff of onions from their fingertips? You can be an expert in religion I'm going to have to use technical terminology, and not do nothing. If you can be an expert on food and not even have a kitchen, never cook. You can do it by talk. You can do it at the secondary intellectual level. And if you didn't think that was important enough, some of you are just looking, just shift your eyes over just a little bit internally. How about a numismatic, or whatever they call them? You could be an expert on the world of coin collecting. I mean, there it is. If you're going to be a coin collector, you got to have coins. That's the whole thing. But you could be an expert. You could have, right now, the definitive book on the market and not have a coin to your name other than what change you got in your pocket. You may have never had a collectible coin, but you could be an expert. Well, it is possible. The point of all this has to do with the operations of your own brain, what's going on. It doesn't have anything that you should know to do with angel food cakes or angels or liver to head coins. It has to do with the way your own brain operates, that people take themselves as being experts on something, and the only thing they're an expert in, from one view, is talking about it. Which, at ordinary secondary levels, is fine. There's nothing wrong. But to wander around and think, yes, I am an expert. Ah, the things I know. Would you care to refine that? Ah, the things I can think about. Ah, the things I can talk about. Ah, the things somebody talks to me about. Where? Yes, I'm an expert. I had another quote. Different field. Ha ha ha. Well, it's nice if you're going to say, well, now, let's jump. I'm glad some of you enjoyed my renditions of Schubert, but now let's go on to Berlioz. So I'm going to change. Here's another quote. Try this one. This one said, this was in the wide, wonderful world of psychology. Actually, it's psychiatry. It said that an attention deficit is believed linked to antisocial behavior, but supporting evidence is inconsistent. Attention deficit. You know what they mean nowadays, don't you? There's children and other grown-up children. The ability to apparently hold one's attention, and in school is where this came from, that there is some belief among professionals now, we're talking about professionals, that attention deficit is believed by many professionals to be directly linked to antisocial behavior, criminal behavior, but the supporting evidence is inconsistent. Pardon me, whoever I'm quoting. It was inconsistent. Well, consistency. What a strange, what a wonderful, and what a necessary secondary word. From any ordinary view, from any logical, rational, intellectual, three-dimensional view, you cannot take any kind of evidence, even the suggestion of evidence, seriously if it is not what? Consistent. That defies the whole scientific, the whole logical. It's not detonation, the connotation of evidence. By the by, some of you seem to like it. I use it as an example. You remember a few tapings back when I was talking about, in a sense, the weirdness of words, and I said, what if I told you something that made sense verbally, linguistically, even intellectually, that the sentence was sensible, but it was so insane. And you remember the example I used? I said, what if I gave you the sense that I said that I said that antisocial behavior, that is criminal behavior, is caused by a yet undiscovered bacteria. A lot of you liked that. You didn't want to admit it, plus you didn't know why you liked it. But as long as I'm here at this area tonight, how would you like this? I'll give you something weirder than that. I'll offer you an aside proof, which is weird and insane as that was. If there is some kind of suggested proof or evidence that that might be true, then it's got to be doubly weird, right? And what greater crowd could I wish for that likes weird stuff than... Don't take it personally. How about this? Since this obviously cannot be true, that criminal behavior is not caused by a bacteria. How about this? Then, if the majority of intellectual, sophisticated, educated humans on this planet are not criminal, which they're not, never have been, then if non-criminal behavior, if non-antisocial behavior is the healthy norm, then criminal behavior, perforce, has got to be an illness. If being non-criminal, which all of life is wired up where they use those specific words, that is the basis of all history, in one sense. It is certainly the basis of all religion. It is the basis of all humanistic theories, feelings. It is simply the basis of the evolution, the continued growth of man, of life through man. That non-criminal, non-aggressive, which is non-criminal, the full sense of the word, by the definitions of the passing states and by the definitions of the ephemeral religions, that non-criminal behavior is the norm. That is the healthy state of man. Then you're left with this. Criminal behavior is some kind of illness. All right, that wasn't weird enough. I'll give you a weirder one. They know this and nobody makes any sense out of it, or nobody will take it as weird as I'm going to give it to you. Second weird proof. Criminal behavior of whatever kind, as they define it, criminal behavior can be stopped in any individual by the simple administration of certain drugs. And anybody that knows anything nowadays, is just fairly well read, knows that. But especially those in specific areas of expertise, psychiatrists, neurologists, anybody in medicine, let us say, or the biological sciences that have any interest in this, everybody knows that certain drugs administered to somebody who consistently engages in criminal behavior, or engaged in it once, it don't matter when, there are certain drugs that can be administered that will stop it. But if they heard me do all this and went, yeah, so? That's just when, well, I'll tell you the kind of guy I am. That's when somebody with as poor an academic track record as me and as unsophisticated, that's when I'm just completely overwhelmed by the weight of the evidence again. When you can point out something in the whole world, the intellectual, sophisticated world of man can hear it, and me kind of look and say, do you hear what I'm saying? And it goes, yeah. Now I wait, and they go, so? It's just enough to crush you. Have these great ideas and then understand that, so? I told you it was weird. And of course, I called it proof. I put that in quotation marks. That doesn't prove anything, does it? No. Okay, back to the subject. We're out of time. I guess I'll have to pick this one back up next time we're taping, if you would like to recall where we were, about the attention deficit being believed now by many professionals to be directly linked to antisocial behavior, but the supporting evidence is inconsistent. Well, I'll leave you one little thing then, if you want to think about it. If we're going to play a cliffhanger and like come in next Saturday for chapter 13 of the Green Hornet meets Tommy of the Jungle. Inconsistency. I can point out to you, for the time being, I'll surely remember and pick up at least this one piece. But you could, if you can see it from another view, look at inconsistency contrary as being suggesting quite formidably validity insofar as the evidence question is concerned, because it at least is showing that the evidence is still alive. Plus that clock's still alive.